Joining the conversation right now, we're going to switch to things Lane County. And Jay Bozievich, West Lane County Commissioner, is with me. And Commissioner, thanks for coming out today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Especially since you said when you get done, you have to be in Springfield by 7 tonight.
Well, as close to 7 as I can get, while obeying the state speed limit.
Yeah, that's right. You want to do that. I want to talk about a couple different things. First of all, let's start with, since we talk about speed laws and that sort of thing. 7 months into the expanded local option levy to help fund operations at the jail and some juvenile functions at the Sheriff's Department. 7 months into that, is it working, the extra money, is it working the way the Sheriff and everybody else said it should or would?
Yeah, it's working exactly as we promised. It was the 55 cents per thousand of assessed value, with 50 cents basically going to the jail for maintaining a minimum of 255 jail beds, and a nickel of that going to our youth services, and it basically doubled our capacity in youth services for detention beds, and also allowed us to reopen 24-hour intake for youth services. But right now we have 336 local jail beds available. So it's actually more than what we promised under the levy. And we have gone from just under 100 capacity-based releases a week before we reopened those beds to 34 capacity-based releases a week, which is a really big decrease in people getting out, early or pre-trial, as well as we have not released any violent offenders from the jail early.
Now the capacity-based releases, because it was a limited number of spaces at the jail, every week the sheriff would have to go, okay, and they had a matrix system, a prioritization system, and first of all, there were people that were being held waiting for trial, sometimes would be set free, and some of them were kind of dangerous people.
Yeah,
they're accused of crimes that were pretty bad.
Right. Yeah. One of the major supporters for, the jail levy was the domestic violence professionals, the prevention and treatment professionals in that group, because they understand that it's important for us to be able to hold those folks that are charged with domestic violence for a time, so that the partner can get resituated and safe before they're released. We were releasing people that were accused of assault, force, strangulation, which is typically a domestic violence charge, and that's really a dangerous situation when you're releasing those people. And it wasn't, once a week the sheriff made these decisions. It was a daily.
Yeah. They released the figures on a weekly basis.
They released them on a weekly basis, but every day there were people being released. And generally it was right around 11 o'clock in the morning. You'd have to make decisions about capacity for the day, and they would go through a matrix of how dangerous this person was, and based on how many beds they have was how far down the scoring they went. And when they only had a limited number of beds, that scoring was fairly high risk people being released. Now we're down to where we're seeing mostly just property crime people being released.
Now, one of the results of those releases were that people accused of crimes would be given a court date. They would be set free and say, okay, ordinarily we would hold you until your trial date, which is in 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 weeks, but we're going to release you, and you have to pinky swear that you'll be back here for court on the 22nd or the 24th or whatever, and they wouldn't show up because there was no teeth in it. They knew if they didn't show up and they got arrested for something else down the line, they were decided for failure to appear and released again. So there were no consequences. Has that turned around?
Yeah, the failure to appear has improved. That's a big issue when you're releasing people early. And in general, when you don't have those beds to sanction people, and that's part of what the youth services beds really function as, is they function as a sanction for those youth that are in trouble, that break their agreements with their counselors or their actual parole agreements. It's a sanction that's available. Same thing with the people on the failure to appears. If there's no sanction, then there's no need to appear. And you'll see guys that will get arrested for a property crime, be matrixed out, fail to appear, get arrested again, do that over and over again until they get to the point where they become what the DA targets as a habitual property crime person, and they'll then get prosecuted, under the full extent of the law to try and get that person that's a habitual property crime out of the society, because there's 90% of the property crimes happen by a small minority of repeat offenders. So those people get targeted. Whereas if we could just get those people held and go to trial and get sanctions the first time, they might get help with the addiction or whatever is driving the property crime. It's much more cost effective, and the system's so far broken. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the addiction treatment folks also supported the jail levy.
The district attorney, Alex Gardner, supported as well, even though he wasn't going to get anything in the deal, not directly.
That's correct. Yeah. Absolutely. And we were very specific in the way that the levy was written, that these funds were going to go into a special revenue fund where they're going to be audited annually, and they were for specifically for the jail beds and specifically for youth services. So none of these additional funds are going in the district attorney's office. But he understands the first place we had to fix the system was the jail system.
But he did wind up ultimately benefiting somewhat from it, because there were people that would actually show up for trial when they were supposed to. So because if somebody was released and told to report back for trial, and there's a court date, one of the deputy district attorneys would have to be in that courtroom that day.
Right.
And if nobody appeared, wasted an hour or two.
Yeah, it definitely helped him with his workload. Preparing for a trial, showing up and not having the perpetrator show up, is wasted time for the deputy DAs, and that's an improvement in efficiency.
Yeah.
So it helps him somewhat, but he didn't directly benefit from the funds.
Maybe didn't save the time, but the time they spent was fruitful, actually.
Yeah.
And also holding people accountable for the crime. I realize the figures are really difficult to measure, but do you think that Lane County is safer today than what it was a year ago? That's one of those touchy-feely questions.
Yeah, I think in some ways it is safer because we haven't released any violent offenders. In those 100 capacity-based releases a week in the prior year preceding the levy taking effect, we released over 200 violent offenders back out into the community.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people to just, to actually do a person crime and have back out in the community. So I think keeping those people in jail until they get to their trial date or finish their terms makes the county safer. So I would say yes, overall it is safer, but compared to what? Where we should be with our public safety system, when we used to have 99 deputies instead of 18, patrolling Lane County, when we used to have 500 some odd jail beds open instead of 300, it's not quite the same
Or
system.
at this time last year was, 130?
Yeah.
Jay Bozievich is West Lane County Commissioner visiting with us on Our Town this afternoon. One thing that the levy did, Commissioner, did not provide for any more patrol deputies or detectives to respond. So, the county, in unincorporated areas of Lane County, if there's a property crime, people still are going to go a long time without seeing a deputy, or they may have to do something by internet or mail or by the phone if they have to report something. They're not going to have that direct contact. Are you getting feedback from people? Are they saying, okay, we got jail beds, can we get some more deputies?
Yeah, overall everybody would like to see a greater level of rural patrol. One of the things we have been able to do as a board was we got down to where we were only in 16 hours a day we have patrol deputies on the street. We worked with the legislature to get some clarification. They had passed a law that allowed us to use federal forest funds that went into the road fund for patrol services, but they didn't define what patrol services was.
Yeah.
So the county had been taking a very conservative approach to how much money they used from the road fund for patrol. The legislature clarified that, and we've been able to increase the amount of support from the road fund for patrol services. So we're back to 24-hour patrol. They are actually doing some property crime follow-up in patrol. It's not at the level we should be at, but at least we have 24-hour service out there, which provides the backup for the resident
Yeah.
deputy system that's still present in Lane County. And I think we're better now than we were a couple years ago, but we're still far from where we should be with rural patrol.
I know Sheriff Tom Turner, when it was 16 hours a day, he didn't like to talk about that because he didn't like to, he didn't want to really advertise that there were 8 hours a day that there was no deputy available to respond. But the bad guys knew it anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean the bad guys. One of the things is, as say Alex Gardner as a DA goes to the National DA Association meeting or something like that, and he'll have somebody from Florida tell him about how the folks that are in the lockup there talk about how they're going to head out to Oregon and in particular Eugene Springfield area because they heard it's basically a get out of jail free zone because they know that there's no consequences out here. We have a national reputation for that right now, and that's something I'd like to change.
That's not the out of area marketing campaign.
No. Yeah, that's not what we want to be known
that
for.
You're interested. Jay Bozievich is West Lane County Commissioner and just finished your third year in that position. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. We're going to take a break, come back. We're going to talk some more about things happening in Lane County and specifically the search for a new county administrator. We'll talk about that right after this. Commissioner, it's been a contentious year or an interesting year at Lane County. Things started about a year ago this time with former Administrator Leanne Richardson asking for a pay raise, and you thought that got that kind of taken care of. That was a political. I mean, tell me about the pay raise. She didn't do anything illegal, and that's not what I'm trying to infer. But tell me about how that came up. It seemed to me like it was kind of a subterfuge because it was the pay raise for the administrator was proposed through a third party, right?
Well, actually, we had asked them to do a salary survey
Right.
as part of her annual review to see where she compared with people similar, and she actually was below market in the salary survey. At the same time, the recommendation was that we weren't going to be giving her a raise because of our budget situation.
Right. Yeah.
And that was, kind of the understanding as it was set for the agenda, and sometime between when it was proposed to go on the agenda and actually being put on the agenda, a memo was written to the board that basically included the raise, much to the surprise of the board.
And it was a significant raise. What, 18%?
About 15%.
15%.
Yeah.
And we're talking about $150,000. $152,000 was the salary, and so 15% of that's a considerable amount of money. And with the dire straits the county was in, and not too far away from it still.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it was maybe not fiscally prudent for elected officials to agree to something like that, which you didn't. But also, it wound up a public relations nightmare.
It was a very tone-deaf thing to do, and 2020 hindsight, it was an indication that there was something else going on in Miss Richardson's life that was driving some of that behavior to be so politically tone-deaf at that time.
She went on down the line, and apparently she didn't take anything or keep anything that she was not legally entitled to. Part of the compensation package is deferred compensation, which is into a retirement type account or something like that.
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
Basically deferred comp, where it's paid into an account ahead of taxes.
Yeah.
So it goes in tax-free.
Yeah. And she did a temporary diversion of portion of that or all of that into her regular take-home salary.
Right, so it became taxable income.
Yeah, but she did it without the commission's approval or knowledge.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're really getting kind of uncomfortable talking about this. And it's a contentious issue, and it's a legal issue, and it's.
I'm trying to be careful to make sure.
Because also you have an agreement, I believe, with her about how much you can talk about things. But right now we're talking about things that are public record.
Yeah.
Yeah. It became knowledge over the summer, and I understand she paid some of the deferred compensation back or put it back into her. That's what was reported in one source. Some of it was paid back. But essentially the commission lost faith in her ability to, if you lose trust in your key employee, that makes it tough to get by.
I think, the independent investigation was done. The executive summary that was released stated that she was not truthful about certain things, and that basically, broke the trust with the board, and of course the 5-0 vote to terminate her. And since then we've terminated her and moved on, with the interim acting administrator Alicia Hayes, and we're in the process right now of actually hiring a new administrator. And in fact, we met today to review candidates.
Before we get into that, I just want to wrap up on this one, because you mentioned the summary of the investigation. You released that. Register Guard has asked the county to release the summary itself, and there are whistleblowers involved, and
Or at least the report itself.
the report itself, excuse me. There are whistleblowers and their identities involved, and not only do you want to honor that confidentiality, but you're required to honor that confidentiality under whistleblower laws, right?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole long section in ORS. There's also a long section in federal code about protections of whistleblowers. And you basically have to have their written permission to reveal their identity. And one of the discussions is the Register Guard's interpreting those laws one way, and
That's usually the way it is.
we're trying to protect the taxpayers from large lawsuits and legal settlements, so we're taking a stance that's in that direction. Plus, the big thing for me is to make sure that the next time something happens that we should know about, our employees feel comfortable in stepping forward, that we're not going to release their names willy-nilly, and they'll have to suffer the public consequences of being identified as a whistleblower. We want our employees to feel confident that they can come forward and tell us about things and not be worried about what will happen after.
And some of it could be related to feelings of personal safety, but also job security, because if somebody rats out their boss or their boss's boss, there may be somebody that doesn't agree with that.
Or even the public ridicule. One of the things people are, some of them are concerned about is, why didn't you come forward sooner? Shouldn't that person be fired for not coming forward sooner? Why? And they look like the bad person, and when they actually were doing something good.
Now, the Register Guard has requested a copy of the report and has said, well, just black out the names or anything that might lead us to informing us who those whistleblowers are. But actually, you can't do that, and it has to do with a prior court case that the Register Guard was involved in.
There's actually a court decision where the Register Guard sued the Springfield School District because they had released partial documents on a personnel situation where they didn't release the full set of documents. And the Guard basically went into court and said, you're only releasing what supports your side of the story. We want to see everything. And because you went beyond an executive summary of facts, you're prejudicing everybody by what you're choosing to release versus what you're not releasing. So therefore, and the court sided with the Guard and released all the information. And that's the concern, is if we try and do something like that. Plus also, just blacking out a name doesn't mean you won't figure out who that employee is, because the information they supplied can lead people to follow the trail and figure out which employees have that information, and then figure out which employee might be the whistleblower.
All right, and that issue is going before a judge later this month.
Actually, it's going before a judge next week on the 11th.
Next week, that's this month.
I think we have a conference with the Guard tomorrow, hoping to possibly reach some kind of
possible settlement.
But the actual trial's set for the 11th. And that was at our request to move it up. It was originally set for late April, and the county requested that it be expedited.
All right, so that issue hopefully be resolved sometime next week. And And I don't know if you'll be able to talk about more after that time or not. You know, maybe
That depends
not.
on what either comes up in the settlement or what the court orders us to do.
Let's talk about the search for a replacement, though, for Leanne Richardson. She left in August, and almost immediately you started the wheels turning. The commissioner started the wheels turning to find a replacement. And she was promoted from within. That really didn't work out well. Sometimes it does work out well to promote within.
Yeah, we've had two very successful county administrators prior to her
Yes.
that were promoted from within.
Not two in a row, though.
No.
Yeah,
Well, they go back. You know.
Yeah.
Bill Van Vactor,
You're right.
Jim Johnson.
Yeah, right. They were promoted from within. It's a very complex position. How many different departments, how many different employees, how many different types of things is this one person responsible for overseeing?
Well, we went from 14 departments down to 9 in some of what Leanne helped us with in trying
Right.
to decrease our budget by 20%. But there's 9 departments that report to the county administrator, a total of 1,300 FTE plus, 1,300 plus, I should say, FTE.
Full-time
reporting.
equivalent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people. And that ranges from, you know, the folks that are plowing your streets, you know, during the winter storm that may be coming up tomorrow.
That's right.
To, you know, the sheriff's office, which is actually headed by an elected department head, or the DA's office that's headed by the elected DA, or even assessment and taxation, which is an elected assessor.
But
to-
all those employees
yeah.
in those departments are actually county employees.
They're county employees
Yeah.
that we manage all the HR and everything to, you know, elections and deeds and records, to, you know, our health and human services folks that deal with, you know, all of the Medicaid and Medicare and, you know, the
Senior
WIC,
disabled services and
the WIC program, you know, you name it. You
Yeah.
know, there's so many different programs that run the gamut of government services.
So it's a pretty large complex, a lot of different laws governing how that operates. It's
Yeah, from the federal
Yeah.
laws on the spending of the federal money
Yeah.
to the Oregon laws on everything from public meetings to, you know,
yeah.
to whistleblower.
You commented that when we were talking about Leanne Richardson a year ago in the salary evaluation, you said that actually her salary of $152,000 was actually below market for a government agency of this size and this complexity. What do you have to compare it to?
But we've done several different versions of that. We did one that was done by our internal staff back, you know, a year ago last January. One of the first things we asked the consultant, Protham and Associates, that is doing our recruitment for the new position, is to do the same thing over again as a third party, and came to basically the same conclusion, that we're still under market. And that's comparing to, say, the Clackamas, Marion County, that are similar size and population, looking at the counties that are comparable within Oregon, looking at cities that are comparable size, city managers, you know, county execs, you know, we're just not comparing well.
Well, and you
just
commented even right here in Lane County, Eugene.
Yeah. Eugene's city manager makes over $180,000 a year.
Yeah. I know you're a pretty conservative guy, and you have a track record of being a fiscal conservative. I've talked to you an awful lot about these sorts of things. So, for you to say $152,000, not really enough. I mean, you've got a little bit of background to show me that you're not just going on emotions of, oh gosh, we got to get that person as much money as we can. It's a competitive market too.
Yeah, it is. And looking at the application pool that we got, and looking at the salary range that the current applicants are in right now, it's, I think, what we advertised for, which was basically 145 to 175, fits right in the range we should be in. Of course, I'm going to try and bargain for the the low end of that.
Well, part
when
of
we
it is
get
Lane
into the
County,
hiring process.
Lane
but
County
we'll
is a
see.
very nice place to live,
Yeah.
too, and there are things here that are not as expensive as in other parts of the country as well. You had a pretty good response though. Nearly 24 applicants.
Yeah,
responded.
we had 23 qualified applicants that were screened by our consultant, and then he winnowed those down to the top 12 and did interviews by Skype with each of the 12 applicants. And it looks like the board's going to move forward with 5 of those to an interview process.
Because you guys met this morning in executive session, and it's private, it's a personnel issue. You can't talk about a lot of things that took place in that, but there was a registered guard reporter in the room, I'm sure, keeping.
Actually, there wasn't this time.
Not this time.
I was very surprised.
Okay.
Saul wasn't there.
It could have been.
but there could have been.
Yeah, but basically, you've identified 5 that you want to come in later this month.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're, first of all, they have to be contacted, see if they're still
Right.
willing to go to that they're still willing to be interviewed as a finalist. And we're hoping to bring the finalist in on February 19th, and that evening have a reception that's open to the public where the public can come meet these finalists in a very casual sort of setting. And then the next day we'll do an interview panel with the Board of Commissioners, plus we're going to set up 2 mixed interview panels with internal staff and external stakeholders, where we're going to have a little bit of both on both panels. So there'll be the board panel and a panel 1 and a panel 2.
Right.
That'll be interviewing that, and the panel 1 and panel 2 mixed panels will actually, the public can come and sit basically in the room and
listen to the interaction
listen to and we'll actually have comment cards for the public to submit at the end of the interviews. They won't be able to actively participate in those interviews, but there'll be those 2 opportunities for the public to come and see and get to know those applicants. But we've got some really high quality folks that applied. I was pleased with the recruitment. I think it's been, so far it's been a successful recruitment.
Good cross section.
Yeah, very good cross section. We had applicants come from as far away as Florida.
Really?
Yeah.
Not the ones that were in the jail that we talked about.
No.
Okay.
No, they weren't coming here for that.
For the get out of jail free environment.
Might have been looking for getting away from the heat and humidity.
Yeah. Do you have a target date for having somebody on board?
We're hoping to make the decision as to who our choice is shortly after the 20th, and make them an offer, and hopefully if we can get the contract resolved and everything, I'm hoping to be able to have somebody on board, by April.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, our acting administrator, Alicia Hayes, was joking she'd like to be her transition be April 1st.
Okay. Jay Bozievich, West Lane County Commissioner. We're going to take a break, come back, and we'll wrap up our conversation with him. And we'll talk with you about a few other things happening, about potential of some pretty tough weather coming our way. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We'll be back with more Our Town in just a couple minutes. And welcome back to Our Town. Wrapping up our conversation with West Lane County Commissioner Jay Bozievich. And Commissioner, we talked about the jail beds, and we talked about the administrator. We haven't talked about the general financial prospects for Lane County. And last year, the county received like a last-minute payment or notice of payment for the county payments, the Timber
Secure Rural Schools.
Secure Rural Schools Act.
Yeah.
And you carried that over, actually, because it was well into the budget year. You already had your spending set and your revenue set.
Mm-hmm.
You carried it into this budget year. So how much money was that, and what is the impact of being able to carry that over?
Yeah. Well, basically, it was about $3.5 million additional funds in the general fund and about $6.5 million into the road fund. And we just basically said, we're just going to hold on to that because we know we have a deficit coming up in the following year. And sure enough, it just about perfectly fills our hole for this year. So this year's coming budget that we're going to be adopting this May to start July 1st is really not going to have any significant cuts. There may be some rearranging of funds around as some grants are cut, and some grants we get. But overall, we're not having to make the large adjustments to our budget we've had to over the past several years. And that's just because we were smart, put that money aside, knowing we were having this hole coming up.
And it's kind of a luxury maybe to get that breathing room for 1 year, that not only do you not have to say, oh, gloom and doom, everybody's going to have to cut, we're going to have to lose this, we're going to have to go through this process, but also folks in the county, the residents and the taxpayers aren't going to have to hear that message this year, or at least not as much.
Yeah, and what it gives us is a little bit of time to proactively plan for the future, because the next budget cycle will have cuts unless something changes drastically in Congress as far as federal forest payments goes. And we need to look at the next steps. The jail levy was basically what we called a first step in a temporary measure. It only lasts 5 years. It only fixes jail beds and youth services, and it doesn't really bring them up to an adequate level.
Yeah.
A county of our size should have 1,000 jail beds, not 350.
Yeah.
So we're really not there yet. So we hope to develop, and we're working on a 10-year public safety plan that we hopefully can look 10 years out and say, this is where we want to be in 10 years. This is how we're going to get there. And this 1 year respite gives us the ability to look at that and then come back to the voters and say, this is how we're going to get to where we want to go in 10 years, and this is what we're going to be asking you to do.
How does economic recovery factor into the county finances? I mean, basically, user fees, property taxes, and pass-through from other government agencies or government levels above you. For instance, the state. The state general fund is income tax primarily, and that's where a lot of the stuff would come from prior, but that's what has really, that's the spigot that's been turned off.
Yeah, and it's actually coming back a little bit. One of the reasons why we've got a balanced budget coming up next year is property values have recovered, and we're not seeing the decline in property values, which was causing our property taxes actually to decline, even though there's a lag in doing so. So we're actually seeing that stabilize, so we're not seeing a decrease in our property tax.
But there's a big but over that.
Yeah.
With compression.
Yeah.
And several government agencies, at least in this area, have been dealing with, and the compression is just real simple. It's a limitation on how much a particular property can pay for education and or general government services.
And it's we're not quite there through most of the county, but there are some areas where we're in compression.
Yeah.
The real thing is getting economic growth moving in the county, and we're starting to see a big difference. Just recently, in fact, last Friday, I was at the ribbon cutting for the brand new call center in Bonita. That's going to be 200 jobs in a community of 5,000 people. Well, those 200 folks are going to want to escape the fog in the wintertime, and hopefully they'll be down here spending money. I know that when it was foggy a couple weeks ago, everybody down here in Old Town was doing business like gangbusters.
Yeah.
So that's where we need to grow out of this. And those 200 people are going to be paying state income taxes. That supports our schools. It supports the pass-through money that comes to the county. Plus, people that have jobs generally don't get in trouble and have less issues and need for services. So it also helps on the demand end for the county.
Yeah.
So we've got the new call center coming. The new hospital in Junction City will be up and running in 2015, and that's
the new state hospital.
Yeah, the new state hospital, and that's going to be 500 jobs. So those doctors, nurses, custodians, cafeteria workers, whatever, same thing. They'll be coming over to Florence, to recreate.
And not only that, there will be a few people who choose to live in Florence and drive over there, because there has been historically.
Yeah.
Not a great deal.
My very first job when I came to Oregon was working for Branch Engineering in Springfield, and one of our surveyors was Gene Wabi's son, Dan Wabi, and he drove from Florence every day. So yes, people do drive from Florence over to Eugene, Springfield for employment. So I'm happy to land those two, and we're working on more, and we're trying to make it easier to do business here in Lane County, because really the best way to deal with this fiscal crisis for government is get the economy back on track, and that generates the revenue for the government.
Commissioner, thank you very much for coming out, and drive carefully headed home. I know you got another engagement in Springfield, so I promise I'd try to get you out in a couple minutes. Any last words or comments?
Well, I will be careful going hucklebuck down the road, to use one of your terms.
Yeah.
But just that we're moving ahead in Lane County. We're looking forward, and I think things are looking up. We've stabilized our budget right now, and I think things are going well and improving, and I'm looking forward to good things.
All right. Well, Commissioner, thank you very much for coming out. Drive carefully headed back to the valley.